latest version of QPDU. We have a really great panel here. Today's lead is going to be, um, sorry, Janis, who's right in front of us, Janis Reed with QualiPro. And Janis, if you want to do an introduction, and then we'll go across with the panel so everybody can introduce themselves. And I'll let you take it from here. And just while I'm here, thank you to QualiPro for hosting the event. And we look forward to hearing the information today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate you being here and being supportive of QP and QPTU. My name is Janis Reed. I am the Director of Product Development and Regulatory here at QualiPro. So it's my job to bring new products into the turf space on behalf of the QualiPro brand. I am by training an entomologist, so a little different than a lot of the agronomists on the panel today. And my experience is a lot of structural and more LCO side than it is professional turf, but I do have a little bit of background on the turf side. My specialty includes insecticides, fungicides, regulatory, and a little bit of chemistry and formulation. So if any questions come up today on those, I'll probably try to lead the answers on those. I'd like the rest of the panel to introduce themselves as well. So let's start with Lee. Let's start with you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lee Miller. I'm the extension turfgrass pathologist at Purdue. The way I've explained it to my mother, I'm a corner for grass, the legal kind. So I tell folks why their grass died and I tell them how to fix it. I do research, so I'm not so morbid all the time. So looking at ways of controlling dollar spot with interseeding bent grasses, looking at the new fad of autonomous mowers and what that kind of impact is on disease severity. We do a lot of work on soil-borne diseases, and I'll talk about some of those, particularly some of the patch diseases like take-all patch and summer patch. I got into this, down the Plinko game of life because my lack of talent in golf pushed me into research. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lee. Dr. McGraw.
I'm Ben McGraw. I'm the turfgrass entomologist at Penn State. I guess I didn't know that we were doing monologues. However, I guess I study turfgrass insects of the cool season variety and also do some research on earthworms as well. And I'm also the program coordinator of at least 5 programs here at Penn State. I'm frazzled from the day of spraying already. I don't even know how many programs we have. We have 5 online and 1 residential, and I get to oversee those programs.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Billison.
Hi, I'm Terry Billison. I am the turfgrass entomologist at North Carolina State University. So I work in the transition zone, cool season insects in the western part of the state, in the mountains, and then warm season grass as well. So mole crickets, chinch bugs, a lot of those kinds of very regional specific insects, but they're a big problem here. So that's kind of the area of my expertise.
All right, thank you. And finally, last but not least, Dr. Elmore.
Hi, I'm the turfgrass weed scientist at Rutgers University. So I do teaching, I do research, and then I do extension outreach, to people like you all. So mostly focus on anything weed control and cool season turf, although I did spend some time in my career in warm season turf. But I think, yeah, that's it.
All right. So I'm going to kick us off with just kind of some introductory questions to pose to you guys as panelists, and then we'll kind of see who wants to field each one. So I'm going to start with kind of where I operate, and that is how things change in our industry, and sometimes those changes happen very rapidly. So let's talk about some changes that have happened in the last 5 to 7 years and how they have impacted this particular space. So what's something that's changed in the turfgrass industry over the last few years that has really stood out and made an impact in your space? Ben, you're smiling. I'm gonna pick on you.
Oh
Ben.
man, I should have smiled. I should darken my screen. All right, 5 to 7 years, Janice. I guess that would put us in COVID.
COVID.
Coming out of COVID, at least here in the Northeast, there was a ton of construction, just a huge influx of cash. and how that directly affects my job is, we saw a lot of pests being moved in and sawed. I do a little bit of consulting on the side and visit a lot of golf courses, and so I get pretty familiar with my regular courses that I visit, and I have a pretty good understanding of where pest issues pop up around the course. And I think everybody was ripping up golf courses. Everybody's building. Sod's just kind of this, at least for turfgrass entomologists, it's, we tried to do some studies in the sod world and they don't want us to come there. We had a study with some beagles that were able to sniff out pests, annual bluegrass beagle, and see if we were moving them that way. And we proved the concept and then brought it to the sod industry. And they're like, please don't come here. I don't think they wanted to know whether or not they were moving it around. I think we have a pretty good indication that we've moved around several key pests here in the Northeast. So, that trend still seems to be going strong. I was just in Pittsburgh yesterday, and a lot of, probably 2 out of the 3 courses that I visited, and another 3 the previous week. They're all doing construction to some degree or another. So we're constantly resetting the table with our insect pests when we're bringing in sod. So that's the big thing that I've seen. I think also with that influx of cash from COVID and the increased plays and, at the municipal level as well, I think people are more likely to spend money on better controls. That's not good for me. I need it to be warm and wet and have insect populations just ripping through the turf, and have people use marginal products so that they need us, right? We come to us for advice. So it's been pretty quiet, I would say, for the last 5 to 7 years. I need the world to burn, Janis. I need the world to burn.
With the current geopolitical climate, maybe we should
Yes.
not say that. Dr. Miller, since we're kind of talking cool season, let's stay up north in Purdue. I mean, not to say anything about Rutgers.
I just can't believe he didn't say annual bluegrass weevil myself. So for us, I really feel like, and maybe this isn't just in the last 5 years, but it definitely has felt like the springs have just gotten wetter and more violent. And it seems like that folks just aren't able to dry out and allow turfgrass roots to grow. It seems like they're in a constant saturated situation until we get to about June, and then the water shuts off, and those plants are really made more susceptible to root pathogens for sure. Things like take all patch and summer patch and your Pythium root rots. So that to me is really stood out, that guys just have not been able to really drive root growth during the spring. Last year in this region, the Ohio River Valley had historic floods. And down there it was a very terrible growing environment. Good for Ben and us, right? So last year I actually had more samples than I've ever had coming to the diagnostic lab. Not that I want them or need them all, because they all go through my eyes. But down there, I actually did looked at some of the weather, and it had the same from the beginning of June to the middle of August, the same humidity in Evansville, Indiana, than Jacksonville, Florida. And in Jacksonville, Florida, they do not have cool season bed grass. So that's been a real challenge, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Okay. All right. Dr. Billison, Dr. Elmore, anything to add there from your guys' perspective? Terry, a little more warm season-ish there?
Yeah, I can add on a little bit. I think in the southeast and mid-Atlantic a little bit, we're seeing more extreme fluctuations in weather in general, and it depends on season. So we have exceptionally the last couple of years dry winters and springs, which can exacerbate insect damage in the spring. So crane flies are more of a problem. Grubs can be more of a problem at times that we don't typically think of as the best times to treat for them, but it's when people are noticing them. So that is challenging from a recommendation perspective. And then not specific to the Southeast, but in the last 5 years, we've had the 2 worst fall armyworm years on record, 2021 and 2024. And that is definitely, we see it usually happen. We have these insects move in, they overwinter in states farther south than us. They move into the area and are relatively unnoticed until we get that late summer, fall, heavy precipitation eras, usually linked with some kind of tropical storm system, and those populations just explode. And so it's very late season. When we think of turfgrass insect management timing, it seems to catch people by surprise, and then there's kind of this panic ensuing, like we've never seen them before, but they cause a lot of destruction in a very short period of time. They're particularly damaging in lawn and landscape, but they can really feed on any number of really plant species even beyond grasses. So that's one that it used to be on our radar, but now I feel like I'm inundated, and I do think it's linked to some of those kind of unusual and fluctuating weather patterns.
Sure. All right, Dr. Elmore, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just what Ben said. I mean, there's just a lot more play, so that's going to put more stress on the turf. It's going to invite more opportunities for weeds, but with that more play, there's been bigger budgets and people that maybe weren't willing to commit to a more expensive chemical program, for example. It seemed like since COVID hit, they're just like, yeah, just tell me what I need to do. I got money. I'm ready to spend it. And that wasn't the case before. And especially if you contrast that with lawn care, they're still trying to eke out tiny margins. And so it hasn't changed as much in lawn care as I think as it has in golf, because again, people just seem more willing to commit to whatever they need to get the job done, at least from a chemistry perspective. Obviously, labor is still a challenge, but it's been the biggest thing.
Thank you. That was very insightful from all of you. Appreciate it. So, kind of relating what you guys do in the research space to the real world, what do you think is a biggest gap or a watch out if a superintendent is reading a research paper or attending a field day? What is the biggest gap that you see in between the research trials that are conducted at the university level and what happens on a real world golf course?
I can jump in very quickly and reiterate what Ben said already. It's when we're thinking about trials, there is such a difference between like natural and artificial infestations. The conditions within site are so different. And I think especially for insects, it makes them very unpredictable. And so they respond to site specific conditions just as much, if not more so, than our other pest groups. And so I think that the main differences, outcomes that we anticipate in the field based on what trials are conducted under controlled settings are obviously going to be maybe an indication of what's happening, but we won't be able to necessarily replicate it. And that's a struggle that at least I deal with in my trials, is that, I mean, we are constantly hopping from site to site, just trying to ensure good data. And we have to find those specific scenarios. We're not being able to go to the same site year after year, or even infest at our turf research farm, because certain insects are going to respond very differently to those varying conditions. So it's not, take it with a grain of salt, but you're not going to necessarily be able to replicate research that you're seeing, step by step. There are things unknown and undescribed that they're also responding to.
I guess I'd say from the weed science perspective, a lot of times we don't do a good job of growing good turf grass because we want to generate really high weed pressure. And so if you look at a trial, and it says this treatment provided 95% control on the golf course, in the good areas, it's going to be more than that, probably 100%. And in the poorer areas, it might be more like what you actually see in the trial. So more trying to rank how different treatments perform. And I feel like, again, and also trying to get a little bit more insight into how the turf was managed. I know that's one of the things I've kind of been focused on is, okay, let's think a little bit more about how we culture the turf and not just try to annihilate the weeds, although that part is pretty fun too, and how I got into it. But yeah, just having a little bit of perspective that we're usually trying to generate maybe unrealistically high pest pressure to test, because we want to separate how the different treatments do under extreme circumstances. So.
Yeah, and I'll kind of piggyback on that because, in disease we artificially inoculate, we do all of these things, but on the flip side of that, we don't run any tournaments in golf. In lawn, we're not subject to the pressures of having your client that wants to mow at an, tall fescue at an inch and a half because they just saw the Masters on TV, right? So there are those kind of peaks and valleys that I think that the turfgrass manager has that we don't necessarily have in our trials. And I think that there's another aspect too of, particularly when we have trials for dollar spot or something that's a chronic disease where we're making 8, 10, 12 applications during the season, we in practice you don't really make the same fungicide application over and over and over again, right? So there are some aspects there. We have a lot more flexibility in our trials with being able to get out and make an application when the practitioner really can't, right? So when we look at these intervals, say it's a 14-day interval, well, maybe you can't get out for 2 or 3 days, right? Maybe you have a tournament, maybe you have a member guest that's lasting 3 days. So how do you plan around that? And are you actually able to keep as close as possible to the intervals that I think that we're more apt to really be able to stick to. So on one hand, we put everything in like kind of the worst case scenario as Matt was saying. But on the other hand, we also have a lot of advantages to what we do that the normal turfgrass manager doesn't.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. I do think like we're doing trials in small areas, so precision is a lot different than a superintendent who's spraying over, 35 acres of fairways. So precision is one. We try to control for all the variables so that it is, replicable and out there and in the most scientifically sound way. I would say though too, some things that might be different is perceived control. I think we're controlling all these variables where we might be seeding in insects so that we get known quantities at the start that we can assess at the end. Uh, and oftentimes I'll speak with turfgrass managers and they'll say, oh, the X product is really good and it's been good for us. And I know from multiple years of trialing it, it's not that good. But they're not digging up grubs and like counting numbers of grubs. They're looking at whether or not you had visible damage, and those two things are very, very different in our world. Oftentimes you can have a high density of insects and not have damage. So sometimes that's where it can differ as well. You might go to talk and see that this product was the worst ranked product in our trials, and you think, well, that's always been great for us. Insects don't occur as uniformly as something like weeds or diseases. They're very patchy. So just the absence of the insect doesn't mean control.
Very, very insightful. So, kind of playing off of what Dr. McGraw, Dr. Billison, and Dr. Elmore spoke on is pest pressure. So,
Not you, Lee Miller. She called you out.
sorry,
Better
you talked
step
about
it up.
something different, which I noted. So, give me a minute.
There's no disease pressure out there. Don't worry about it.
Okay, we'll skip that one. It's
Nothing
not
insightful.
nothing important. Um, And Dr. Miller talked about fungus and other disease pressure, but this question is going to be for weeds and insects. Are you seeing the insect and weed pressure shift in the space or show up in a different way than it has in the past? Or are there, is it kind of just business as usual as it pertains to insect and weed control? We'll come back to fungus for you, Lee.
Are you talking about like the complexes changing or
Sure,
like within a
kind of in
site?
the same question from earlier, like in the past 5 to 7 years with the changing climatic conditions that Dr. Billison mentioned,
Yeah,
other abiotic factors, are you seeing that show up in the weed and insect pressure?
I would say, yeah, like on a site, we see things move around. With our less mobile insects, things like our walking insects, like annual bluegrass weevil or bill bugs, would seem to like hit it in check in one area and it might pop in another. But I would say, what Lee talked about, the changing environment is a big one. And so, we're either really, really wet in spring or really, really dry in summer. That seems to be just so chaotic now. And that is definitely affecting or influencing some of the populations that we see, like chinch bugs being a big one.
Yeah.
It's really dry right now. Last week was really wet, but it's hot. It's really hot. So it's looking to be a big chinch bug year here in the Northeast. And that's something that in the last 5 to 7 years has really exploded. Other pests like European crane flies. I think I just got a phone call about those, so maybe I'll be eating my words here in a moment. But man, I would love to have a good crane fly year. It would be awesome, but we just can't count on the rainfall when it happens around their egg laying periods. It's just really choked out populations in fall. We've had some dry falls that have really kept their populations low. We're looking into those things with the bluegrass weevil as well. So yeah, I would say definitely these things are changing and the environment's the big driver of that. And to some degree, some of the pesticide restrictions, removing pesticides, has influenced that as well. But overall climate.
Terry, you mentioned fall armyworms. Any other insects or weed, mainly insects, that you would comment on?
Well, I can actually add on to crane flies. That's one I
Yeah.
rarely get calls or emails on, but because we have a wet fall when the females are laying eggs and then dry winters and springs, so as the larvae are actively feeding on the turf, the grass is stressed already, and we're in April. It's just it's exacerbated that insect that's the damage that's been there and existing at low levels, but people are paying attention to it because of how those weather patterns are affecting where they're at in their life cycle, and then when they're feeding on the grass and when that grass is stressed. I think also that we do see like these shifts over time. I think this shift in awareness can be happening with some turf managers of this what we think of as emergence of new pests, but really are pests that have been problem for a lot longer than we think. Bill bugs are ones that people seem to be paying a lot more attention to now, and I feel like 10 years ago nobody could diagnose a bill bug problem to save their lives, and so which is good because obviously the timing in the south is going to be different depending on what species you're managing. Your product selection is going to change depending on which generation you're targeting. So like, I mean, it's changing for the better. It is adding to the fact that we manage a complicated system and with complicated pest complexes. And so that awareness is essential to continue managing it as best we can. But I do think that can add to the perception that these insects came out of nowhere. I mean, that's what it was like with fall armyworms. They're in counties we've never had them before. Well, we get them in every county in North Carolina every year. We just don't always pay attention to it. So I don't know. I think it kind of changes. It operates in two different spaces. What's actually happening within the system, and then what we humans are picking up on, and that changes a lot from year to year.
Yes. Matt, Dr. Elmore, thoughts on weeds?
Yeah, I think they're moving around a bit. I mean, I think warm season weeds are kind of moving north. I know before this job, I was in Texas. And so when I took this job like 8 years ago, I guess, my weed science colleagues sort of made fun of me. They're like, oh, you're running away from the real weeds here in the Southeast. You're going to go, study crabgrass and POA in the Northeast, kind of like have fun. And then I got here and everybody was screaming about, warm season weeds that are now a problem here, things like goosegrass and Kalinga and some of the paspalum Dallas grass type weeds. So, and those are, we're kind of like in a mid-Atlantic climate here in New Jersey. And then I was in New England, I guess last month for the New England Regional Show. And I gave a talk about goosegrass, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, there were like 300 people in the room to hear about it. And 2 years ago, when I was at that same New England meeting, they didn't want to hear about goosegrass at all. They didn't care. So something changed over the last couple of years where all of a sudden, they became interested in it. It's the first time I've ever had, more people in the room for a weed scientist than a pathologist. So it wasn't because of me. It was just, I think the weeds are moving around. So Yeah, I think they're moving a little bit. It's not, we don't move them as quickly as insects unless they come in on sod. But I think our warmer winters are not killing perennial structures of some of these warm season weeds, like things like Kalinga and the paspalums and maybe Bermuda grass as well. So they're, getting a little bit more of a foothold. And then as we have these kind of longer summers, things like goosegrass become more of a problem. And I think it may be the climate, it also may be the traffic that now, everybody's riding a golf cart and got, speakers and
Uh-oh. Did we
cart
lose?
traffic. So,
Oh, there he is.
yeah.
Oh, we lost you for a minute there,
Oh,
Matt.
sorry. I was just saying, I think cart traffic is all. It says my internet connection's unstable. So I don't know. I'm in my office. So I don't know.
All right, Dr. Miller, same question, but fungal pathogens.
So I think that you know, we're not really finding what we consider to be a whole lot of new diseases, right? I mean, we're not finding new things, but I think that some of the diseases that we call things like summer patch and take all patch, we're starting to get a better understanding through some of our fancy DNA and molecular methods that they're a lot more intricate than we gave them credit for. I'm working with Mingy Chow at Rutgers, your neighbor there, Matt. And he's kind of finding some different ectotrophic root infecting fungi than we thought were actually involved in this. And, really these things that we've been calling summer patch, we're actually finding other kind of things like slopiomyces might be involved, or there might be disease complexes. And I think that, when I start to tell superintendents about that somewhat, their eyes kind of glaze over, and I understand that. But the real problem is we don't really understand the fungicides that work on these pathogens. We haven't done any of the lab assays. We haven't really looked at those kind of interactions and what the activity of the fungicides are, nor do we understand what the biological drivers are of the infection process. So that's something that's really concerning to me. That kind of, and maybe that's something that's been there the whole time, but we're just now getting a handle on it. And when bent grass dies, we there's this term that's called summer bent grass decline, right? And I think that there's if we can figure out if there's a pathological component to that, maybe we can start to ease some of that and ease some of these a that goes right along with the abiotic stresses that the bent grass is going through during the summer.
All right, very interesting. So because QPTU is kind of targeted towards the up and coming superintendents, guys who are just building their careers, I've got a series of questions to kind of help them along in their growth. So the first one is, you guys are a fantastic resource for superintendents, people who do this for a living. So the question is, how do you recommend that these young professionals build a relationship, utilize, and I guess reach out to you for assistance, help? Like, what do you recommend they do to make connections with you guys? Dr. Miller, I'm going to start with you this time.
Get our cell phone. It's pretty easy. Get our cell phone, text us, call us, send us an email, go to one of our talks, go to field days, go and see what we do in person. Even if you're in an assistant role, at some point you might be in charge of a course and you're going to have a renovation project. It's nice to know what those cultivars look like and what the NTEP trials look like and what some of the controls look like in the field. Try not to be insular in your own facility. I'm sure that you have very good mentors where you are, but try to expand your network, and that includes us. And also realize that when you contact us, we are very much the ponies with the blinders on. So I'm a pathologist. I don't stray into, plant growth regulators and wetting agents. So realize that all of these things that we do are the tidbits that you can pick up to help you build your expertise in your future career. So
Is there a good way versus a bad way to ask for help or advice, in your opinion, Dr. Miller?
no. I mean, I maybe if you're sending me a text every 5 minutes, I'm probably not going to reply, right?
Fair
I
enough.
mean, but in at least with what I do during the summer, I'm pretty much always on. My kids have come to know that they're not going to get this grand summer vacation where we're going to go somewhere for 2 or 3 weeks while it doesn't happen. I think my wife has finally come to terms with that. But there are times when I'm going to take an extra day or two over the weekend just because they have off and I'm able to do that. So the only thing I would say is just have a little bit of patience, but and if we don't get back to you, there are other people, right? So just, if your particular whoever's in your state doesn't get back to you or they can't, then reach out to somebody else. I think that's the easiest way to kind of go about it.
Dr. Elmore, anything to add there? How should people reach out to you? How do you build a relationship with a researcher?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Lee said, I mean, I just say keep in mind that I enjoy interacting with golf course superintendents and people that have questions and want to chat about grass and agronomy way more than most other parts of my job. Sometimes I think I'm just a glorified administrator. So I have a lot more fun taking a phone call or an email and than than most of the rest of my job. So don't hesitate to contact me if you have a question or you see something interesting or whatever. I'm happy to, help you. And I usually learn a lot from every one of those interactions. So it's a two-way street. I have fun and I get a lot out of it. So don't be afraid.
Dr. Billison, anything to add?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like a jerk now. You guys were so nice about it, but I just got an email like a week ago that just said, "Should I spray for grubs?" That sent from my iPhone, and I'm like, sure. I mean, do you want to spray for grubs? So I adding some context and detail to emails is something that people generally forget. If you come up to me in person at a field day or a workshop, obviously I'm going to be able to have a much more enriching discussion. Doesn't mean I don't answer emails, but like the emails I get with a lot of detail that I can provide a much better recommendation is just a better exchange overall. And that is, it's not all the emails I get, but I get plenty of the good and the bad. And also to Lee's point about reaching out to other people, we work for land grant institutions, and we have quite strong extension networks within the state. And we, as specialists, also work with county agents and directors within different regions and localities. So like those people know a lot as well. Not saying that we're not also here to help, but especially in field season, if you need a response within an hour or so and you don't have someone's phone number, don't forget there's a vast network out there. But to Matt's point as well, I do enjoy the individual interactions because then I'm like, oh, that's something I need to mention in my classes. That's what I need to add into my extension slides. I mean, we definitely learn from those experiences as well. It's a mixed bag, but so is anything with science communication. But definitely provide as much information as you can, because otherwise we're just kind of shot in the dark in terms of how we respond and how useful our recommendations are.
So, Dr. McGraw, I'm going to ask you the hardest question. So, Dr. Miller, Dr. Billison mentioned things like field days, conferences, workshops, extension events, email, phone call. Is there another way that someone might build a long-term relationship with you guys as a support person that
Well,
might be
this
creative?
this got real personal real fast. I'm going to say let's start with an email and we'll see how it goes from there. Maybe I'll give you my cell phone. But conferences are a great place to come up. As far as like you have a specific problem, I'm pretty responsive to emails. And yeah, I don't know. The bar is always a great place at conferences, although I drink less and less these days, so maybe not. We'll have to find some other way in the future. But I would say a long-term relationship. I think one great way is we're always looking for field sites. So if you have an insect problem and you want to build that long-term relationship, uh, you know, we're so grateful to the cooperators out there who allow us to rip up their golf courses. I mean, really, literally, like destructively sample their golf courses. It's pretty impressive. And I think I would like to think that a large area or a group of superintendents within the area benefits from that. So, you know, one of our regular consulting courses in Columbus, Ohio, he has a text thread that he sends out everything that I tell him to about 40 people. So, kind of crushes my ability to consult there, Keith, Christina, you know who you are. But I think that's a really good like case study in kind of scientific communication or extension outreach. So, I've developed a relationship with one individual, and then he's developed a relationship out there. So that message gets out there. I'm all for that. Um, don't call me on my office phone. I'm actually talking through my office phone right now. Penn State thought it would be great that we get rid of all our phones. So I don't have a physical phone. So even if I'm sitting at my desk and you call me at this number, there's about a 90% chance that I'm not going to be able to pick it up in time. So, yeah, efficiency.
Okay. So, what's a common misconception of the general public, superintendents, about researchers?
Summer's off. I mean, I get
Ooh, good
so
one.
many. I hate to bother you on your summer vacation. Yeah, it's a 365, 364 maybe days a week. I'll answer an email. I'll respond to you pretty immediately. So yeah, there's no summers off.
Okay, that's a good one.
It's the busiest time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's when everything is kind of pinging off of us at one time. We've got all of our fields, that's when, up here in the Great White North, that's though it's not that it doesn't feel that cold, with the warmest March on record. But that's when we've got all these field trials that are going along with all the things we've done in the greenhouse, all the things that we're doing in the lab. Everything is kind of coming together. You know, I think one of the bigger misconceptions is that we all have the same job and that we all are teaching undergrads. I actually don't teach undergrads at all. I have a graduate student level class, but most of what I do is extension and research and really being out in the industry and in the community and providing diagnostic services. So um, I think that's a misconception, is that we all really have this huge teaching commitment and that we really teach a lot of undergrads. And I don't think that's necessarily the case for all of us.
Terry, Matt, anything to add to that?
I guess one thing would be, that we somehow get a bunch of money from the university to do research. Um, we don't get any money to do anything. We have to go get it ourselves through, working with people like QualiPro, whatever, to do contract research, USGA, GCSAA. We have to spend as much time convincing people to give us money as we do actually doing the work sometimes. So, um, yeah.
I can add on. When people have a problem, they're like, put a student on it. I'm like, students aren't cheap. They're incredibly expensive, and they tend to be here for a couple of years. So I mean, we're not making ends meet, but like I think, and maybe a theme of this part is most of us are working as optimally as we can within our specific job descriptions, our positions, and so, um, but we still want to interact with people as much as possible. So and that was kind of the theme of the previous question. We're not too busy, but there's a reason why we can't react to things as quickly as some people would like us to, and it's because we've got different constraints under which we're working.
Agreed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the kind of research and real world kind of connection. And I think it was Dr. McGraw who mentioned, and maybe Dr. Miller mentioned, like having sites where you can destructively sample. So let's say a superintendent or assistant wants to get involved in some research trials. And let's say they might have a site on their course. How would they get in touch with you and tell you they have this? And what would the steps be to get that as part of a research trial in your area?
Well, I'll say I don't have to destructively sample the way Ben comes in. I mean, Ben comes in with a bulldozer and a shovel, evidently. So no, I mean, I think the main issue is just if you're having a problem, and we can diagnose it and realize that it's an issue, something that has slipped through the cracks of your program. I think that's an easy indication that a research trial would be a good thing. It's often difficult to have a research trial on a green that's in play. But from my aspect, I don't come out and artificial inoculate. I don't have the pathogen in my pocket. I'm not leaking anything out. So I think for me, it's just, do you have the problem? I think that's the first part of the communication. And then from there, kind of working through, okay, well, I have a nursery green, or we have this area that's in the back that we don't often put the pin, or some way of working it out. And luckily for me, a lot of times my plots can be fairly small, so we only need really 5 foot by 5 foot plots, so we can kind of fit things in as we need. Um, and just also realize that we can't say yes to all of them, right? So there is a travel component, there is a time component. But I personally really do like the off-site, off-campus research as much as we could possibly do.
Yeah, we often get a lot of interest in having us on site, and we can put plugs in from a nursery. It's not all destructive sampling, but sometimes we do make holes and stuff. But so we often get a lot of requests, but we do need to have certain conditions, um, in order to have successful trials. So just being willing is not kind of the end step. We usually have to go out and assess the pest population that we're trying to target there and see if it's high enough density. There are certain trials that we do on campus, like that we can control more. So if somebody does want us out at their golf course, they have to have sufficient enough pests and sufficient enough space to host a trial. Uh, we don't really do a whole lot on putting surfaces. We do that where we could control it here. And then the big thing is we got to not have people spray over the trials. We've been very, very lucky over the years. And that hasn't happened too many times, but it does happen. And it's unfortunate when it does. It's a lot of work down the tubes, and sometimes they don't even know it. But we know it when we go to rate the test, because chemicals do work pretty well. So just being willing to host is great, but it's not the be all end all. And oftentimes we do go out and it's not sufficient enough to run a trial, and that's a difficult situation. But try to tell them that they'll have a match somewhere with somebody else. It's just not us at this time.
So the next series of questions are about innovations and changes in the turfgrass space. So kind of going backwards in your career, what is an innovation that's been brought into this space that you feel has really changed the world? And is there anything that's just been launched or has come out recently? Could be anything from autonomous mowing to a product, it doesn't matter, but something you feel changed the world in your space. Dr. Elmore, I'm going to start with you since I haven't picked on you in a minute.
Yeah, I guess going back in my career, I don't know that there's really been any huge innovations. I think going forward, I'm pretty excited about the AI kind of sprayer technology that's being developed, that's already been commercialized. The ability to just specifically, drive a sprayer over an area and have it just target the weeds with, just the weed with the chemistry. I think especially in cool season turf, we're really challenged with a lot of our weed issues that we don't have highly selective options to control the weeds. And I mean, a perfect example is annual bluegrass, right? We don't have anything that will kill the annual bluegrass without killing our desirable turf. So we're to thread that needle of let's try to suppress the annual bluegrass and not injure our turf. We've got a lot of kind of options that require a long-term commitment of several sprays a year or that kind of thing. But there's the eco robotics sprayer that now is available, and I think that is going to change things pretty quickly if that technology gets adopted, because it'll increase selectivity. I think the pesticide savings part of it is interesting, probably more interesting if you're in Europe, and other places where there's pesticide restrictions. But for us, I think that technology could give us new options for weed control, bring things back to the table that we really aren't thinking about right now. So that's the big one that's on my radar.
Dr. Billison, haven't picked on you in a minute either.
Well, I've got like my industry-wide answer with insecticides. We've been fortunate enough to have some new actives come on market in the last couple of years, which have expanded our range of control for some of our more serious pests. I'm always thinking annual bluegrass weevil, like Ben, so like that's one of them. And then precision technology in general in agriculture is, I mean, obviously something that's growing and evolving. It's far less widely adapted in some systems compared to others, but I think it's an area that some of us are dabbling in, more so on the weed science side. But we've been doing some work on that in insect detection and plant stress detection, figuring out how to make these more commercially viable so that we can take these large areas of land and scout and identify hotspot areas before the pests are evident, so that we get better at pinpointing those preventive applications, or really stay ahead of infestations, or examine how they fluctuate throughout the year. And so I think it's an area that's still growing, so it's hard to say 5 to 10 years from now how much of it is going to be part of the actual how we approach management in general. I'm going to stay optimistic for now and say that there are tools that we are developing that could be really useful to us. It just depends on, we operate within a pretty tight system. We don't have the flexibility maybe of some others. And so it's just demonstrating that value will be key moving forward to see how much we can adopt those things that are maybe new.
Excellent. Dr. McGraw, Dr. Miller, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Terry's right. I think we lag behind in the insect world as far as the precision ag. So I don't know if that's going to be a big payoff. If we could treat pests more curatively, that would require detection. That would be huge. But, what's the return on investment? These tools would be very expensive, and pesticides are pretty effective and they're pretty cheap doing what we do. Matt, I don't even know in your world. I think I could go with a backpack sprayer and identify plantain and spray it. So I don't know what a machine's going to tell me that an intern with a backpack sprayer with glyphosate would do. But
Wow, shots
yeah,
fired.
I don't know.
I don't
I'm
know.
a grumpy old man. I don't know about the precision ag, but I would say like precision irrigation. If we're talking about a single tool that's really changed turf, I mean, look at the TDR. That really changed how we watered. I think, that's not that long ago that came in my lifetime anyway, my academic lifetime. And, I think it's greatly reduced the amount of water. And with that, I don't think we see quite the overwatering that we did before. And I would say that, water is life for insects, that's for sure. So I think we're better about, and just the downward trend, or the less water that we're applying in general. I think those are all things that really ratchet down a lot of the insect pest problems. So I would say, if anything, that had a big effect.
Dr. Miller, I'm going to kind of switch the script on you. What's something you're excited in the next 5 to 10 years? And we've talked a little bit about some AI assisted technologies. Anything in what you've seen in the coming soon exciting for you in this space?
Well, crud, I just wanted to add on to theirs.
You're absolutely
That's a
allowed.
great
You're
addition,
allowed.
Ben, by the way. The TDR is a great one. I think that's, and I think that's impacted all of us, particularly for the disease world. But, one of the things that kind of I was going to talk about is our ability in disease modeling. So we've got the Smith-Kearns dollar spot model. Now we've got, kind of discrete thresholds to target soil-borne pathogens. These things are kind of really important because without symptoms, there really is no cue to apply a preventative application to try and prevent disease, right? So building upon that, what I'm really excited about is and this has kind of happened within the last 3 to 5 years, our ability to really start to understand and identify what are the organism networks that are going on within our turfgrass systems. So one of the ways that I try and get my undergrads to be a graduate student, if I see them, they have promise, I basically say, there's a world underneath your feet. When you're on turfgrass, you don't think about it, but there are all these different organisms. There's bacteria, there's fungi, there's this interplay that's going on. So if we can start to develop that understanding of, okay, what is the kind of the microbiome framework of an unhealthy plant? How does our management practices impact that living network, not just the plant itself, but everything else that's kind of interacting with it? And we're getting closer and closer to assigning these kind of jobs or what these organisms do in nature and within the turfgrass system. And I think that's a really important development as we go forward and start to expand that knowledge.
All right. So Jeff Corcoran sent in a question he'd like me to ask before I move into the last thing is going to be a bunch of rapid fire questions. So Jeff asks, what's an aspect of pest control on golf courses that you wish you could get across, you could impart to end users? Is there any protocols or chemistries you wish more end users took advantage of in their respective programs?
I don't know about any specific chemistries. I think just appreciating the whole integrated pest management aspect of it. I mean, a lot of times we talk about it in our presentations or whatever, and it sounds super boring, like IPM. But kind of to Ben's point about that TDR, all the things you're doing that maybe you don't realize have an impact on pest pressure, those actually have a huge impact. And the chemistry aspect is super important, but it's really only a piece of the puzzle. So um, I think just appreciating that. It's something that I've actually gotten to appreciate more as I've gone on through my career is how much all aspects of management really contribute to weed pressure.
The full program, what's happening?
Yeah, and it's always tough to, that's not necessarily the answer when it's August and there's a pest problem. The answer is chemistry, but when there's downtime and even just kind of making observations around the golf course about pest pressure, there's probably some underlying agronomy reason for it.
Dr. Miller, anything you wish golf courses would do more of as it relates to fungal control, or less of?
Oh, thank you. So, you know, I think one of my adages over last year, when we had this much disease pressure is, oftentimes taking something out of the tank is more beneficial than putting something else in. And particularly when we get into July and August, a lot of the ship has been built, and if there's holes in the hull, then it's really difficult when you're And then on top of that, you're going to add a tank mixture that's going to have 14 different components to it, and no one, to my knowledge, is able to tell you what the interaction of all these 14 products are going to do at the same time in the same tank. So what I would like to see superintendents do is to apply things, not tank mix things all at the same time. Right? So think about having some delays between them, because let's face it, when it's July and it's 95 degrees out, bent grass doesn't really want to take up anything. It's just trying to hang on. There's not a lot of activity, there's not a lot of growth. So when you're adding all of these things in, a lot of times it can be more harm than good. Now, that being said, if you properly identify what the disease is, and that is one of the contributing factors, yes, put on a fungicide. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But, going with this, a lot of times when it is hitting the fan and you're losing turf, the hardest thing to do is to do less in that situation. And a lot of times there's an overreaction and you just start throwing the kitchen sink at it. And the kitchen sink is heavy. And if it hits you in the head, it's going to hurt. So,
Might do irreparable damage. Let's see, anybody else want to add on to that from Dr. Miller's perspective?
Yeah, I'll say don't overthink things. I think similar to what Lee said, we make things more complicated than they actually are. Insects, and if I'll speak from that side of things, they're pretty simple organisms. They are bound by the laws of nature, mostly governed by the temperature outside, how active they are. I think a lot of people make a lot of errors, not knowing what their product can and can't do, or how to move it, or where the insect resides, basically its behavior. So knowing a little bit about the insect and where it's going to be, or where it currently is, and then kind of matching that up to the product. I'd say the big one where I see problems, where it's very simple to read the label, but really moving the product with water. How much water? I think that's like the number one question I get about any insecticide application. And so I know a lot of places want to keep it firm and fast and don't want to put them in with water, but most insecticides require water, unless you're talking foliage feeders, and they're on the leaf and you're trying to get that direct contact. That might be the only example, but put it in with some water. How much depends on what you're targeting and what product you've got. And some of those products won't move at all, with no matter how much water. So just try to keep it simple.
All right, well, in the 2 minutes I have left, I'm going to throw some rapid fire questions out, and I'll pick somebody, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to start with you, Matt. One product or tool you can't live without. What's in your truck that you can't live without for doing your research?
The spray wand.
Okay, good answer. Ben, what is the most underrated pest?
Oh, God. I'm going to say chinch bug. That's terrible, but I'm going to say it only because he put me on the spot.
Dr. Miller, if you had unlimited funding to apply to one turf problem, what would it be?
Well, I'd have to go with the summer patch, take all patch conundrum.
Terry, Dr. Billison, what is under-researched in your opinion?
Oh gosh. Everything. No. I already kind of said it, but I think for insects, it's bill bugs. We have crazy bill bug problems down here that largely go undiagnosed, and it's not regional in that we have species of bill bugs everywhere, but they either think it's an annual bluegrass weevil or they don't know what it is. And so they assume it's grubs. So I think we have run into real problems with management because of that.
Okay. Dr. Elmore, how big of a problem on a scale of 1 to 10 is resistance in weed control?
If you're in the southeast, it's probably a 7. If you're in the northeast, it's probably a 2. Cool season, warm season, I guess.
Okay. Same question to you, Dr. McGraw. How big of a problem is resistance with annual bluegrass weevil?
Oh, I thought I was going to do southeast, northeast. That's a good question. I think it's changed greatly over the years. I think we've kind of got the word out about over applying certain products, and that's probably restored a little bit of susceptibility into populations, and we got new products. So probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have said it's an 8. I might lessen that to a 5 for annual bluegrass beetle. If we're talking southern chinch bug in the south, that's a different story, totally different story. And from one bug nerd to another, Terry, I got Bill Bug walking across the parking lot on the way here.
Well, that's a when worlds collide moment. Dr. Miller, same question to you. How big of a problem is resistance in the fungal pathogen space?
Dollar spot is kind of the Pomerania of our world, right? So I would say that it's a lot better than it was 10 years ago because we have new chemistries and new ways to control those resistant strains that have developed. That being said, I think there's a lot that we don't know. So I think that fast forward 5 or 10 years, and I think we could potentially be right back in the same boat, perhaps with pathogens that we didn't think of before.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you on behalf of QP2U and QualiPro for joining today. We really appreciate your time, your expertise, your willingness to share your knowledge and research. And if there's anything that we can do for you in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out. Jeff, do you want to make any closing remarks?
Hey, Janice, just want to thank everybody that got on today. Thank our panelists, and obviously thank Janice for hosting today. And we look forward to continuing QP2U sometime in the fall. And I'm sure that Erica Cardenas will get some emails out and let people know once we get that set up for this fall. But thank you to everybody. Everybody have a great summer. Hope everybody has a great season. And again, appreciate your attendance.
Thanks,
Thank
guys. Have a great
you.
afternoon. Bye-bye.